It started as an ordinary evening, the kind where nothing feels out of place and the world seems to move gently around you. I had been driving home after a long day, my mind wandering between errands and the mundane details of life. The streets were quiet, lit only by the occasional street lamp casting long, lonely shadows across the asphalt. There was a soft drizzle falling, a delicate pattern of rain against the windshield, and for a moment, it felt peaceful, almost serene. I remember gripping the steering wheel, feeling the smooth leather beneath my fingers, and taking a deep breath as though inhaling all the calm of the night. But that calm was fragile as glass, and I had no idea how quickly it was about to shatter. The first sign was a subtle tremor beneath the car, a vibration that seemed almost too gentle to notice. I slowed down, thinking it was just the rain slicking the road, maybe a patch of uneven asphalt, but the sensation didn't go away. In fact, it grew stronger, more insistent, until the engine began to cough, a harsh, jagged sound that made my stomach drop. I tried to reassure myself that it was just a minor issue, that I could get home, that I could deal with it later. But the truth was undeniable. The car was dying. The engine stuttered, then went silent entirely, leaving me stranded in the middle of a wet, lonely street. I remember putting the car in park and sitting there for a long moment, listening to the rain patter softly, feeling it mix with the pounding of my heart. My hands were slick with nervous sweat, and I realized I had no idea what to do next. The headlights of passing cars cast fleeting, cold beams across the dashboard, reminding me of how small and vulnerable I was in that vast, dark world. My mind raced with possibilities, none of them comforting, and every passing second seemed heavier than the last. I grabbed my phone, fumbling with it as if the device itself might provide a lifeline. I knew I could call for help, I knew I had options, but for some reason, the thought of dialing made my hands shake even more. The car breaking down was one thing, a problem that could be solved, but the loneliness that accompanied it felt unbearable. It was as if the world had contracted around me, leaving me alone in a tiny bubble of panic and fear, with only the rain and the dark for company. I tried to calm myself, telling myself I had faced challenges before, that I had gotten through difficult situations, that this was just another test of patience. I put my head back against the seat, letting the chill of the leather seep into my skin, and closed my eyes for a brief moment, imagining that someone would appear to help me, that someone would break through the night and offer comfort. The minutes stretched endlessly, each one heavier than the last, and I felt the weight of helplessness pressing down on me, crushing in slow, relentless waves. The breakdown of the car mirrored something inside me that I hadn't fully acknowledged before, a feeling of instability, of uncertainty, of being on the verge of losing control. I realized that the vehicle, my supposed safe space, was now nothing more than a trap, holding me in place as my thoughts spiraled. I thought about the long drive ahead, about the roads I had yet to travel, and the helplessness I felt intensified. Every sound, the tapping of rain, the distant hum of engines, the rustle of leaves seemed magnified, echoing in the hollow of my anxiety. I remember looking out the window and seeing the reflection of myself in the wet glass, my face pale, my eyes wide with tension. I didn't recognize the person staring back at me, a stranger defined by fear and uncertainty. It was then that I realized that this moment, simple as it seemed, had stripped away all pretenses of control. The car breaking down wasn't just a mechanical failure, it was a rupture in my sense of security, a reminder that life can be unpredictable and cruel without warning. I felt the rawness of vulnerability, a sensation so sharp that it seemed to cut through me from the inside, leaving a hollow ache that I couldn't ignore. I reached for the ignition again, hoping for some miracle, some spark that would bring the engine back to life. But it remained silent, a stubborn refusal that only deepened my despair. I sank further into the seat, my mind replaying every moment leading up to this point, questioning choices and decisions, wondering if I had missed a warning, a sign, anything that might have prepared me for this sudden collapse. The rain continued to fall, a relentless rhythm against the car roof, blending with the frantic beating of my own heart. Every passing car that drove by seemed to remind me of my isolation. The drivers inside were oblivious to my struggle, moving forward in their own lives while I remained frozen, trapped by circumstance. I felt an overwhelming urge to cry, to release the tension building inside me, but even that seemed impossible. The breakdown was not just a technical failure, it was a confrontation with the fragility of life, a harsh lesson in helplessness that left me shaken, uncertain, and painfully aware of my vulnerability. My fingers trembled as I reached for my phone, the cold rain dripping from the roof onto my hands, making them slick and unsteady. I had called him countless times before when life threw obstacles in my way, but this moment felt different. There was a quiet desperation in the pit of my stomach, a gnawing fear that perhaps this time no one would answer, and I would be left entirely alone with the weight of uncertainty pressing down on me. I scrolled through my contacts with shaking hands, my thumb hovering over his name, knowing that the act of dialing could change everything. Every second felt elongated, the silence between each heartbeat amplified by the relentless patter of rain against the car. I hesitated, questioning whether I should call him. Should I reach out when I was feeling so vulnerable, so exposed? But the thought of being stranded, utterly helpless, with no one to lean on was unbearable. I pressed the call button, and the sound of ringing filled the car, a stark reminder that I was on the edge of hope and despair. Each ring was a heartbeat, a pulse of anticipation, a fragile thread connecting me to the possibility of help, and yet the more it rang, the more my anxiety built, twisting in knots inside me. When he finally answered, his voice was calm, almost too calm, and at first, relief flooded me like a warm wave. I wanted to cry into the phone, to let him hear the tremor in my voice, to beg for help, to cling to the familiarity of his presence. But then, as the conversation unfolded, I realized something was off. His words were clipped, evasive, distant, as though he were speaking to a stranger rather than the person who had shared his life, his secrets, and his heart. Every syllable he spoke felt deliberate, measured, almost rehearsed, and my chest tightened with a sudden, inexplicable dread. I asked him where he was, trying to sound casual, trying to mask the rising panic in my voice. I pictured him rushing to my side, a reassuring figure breaking through the storm, a lifeline in a sea of uncertainty. But his answer was vague, indirect, and strangely hesitant. There was a pause, a silence that seemed to stretch on forever, and in that pause, my mind began to race. Thoughts collided in chaotic succession, the possibility of betrayal, of hidden truths, of the life I thought I knew unraveling in real time. I couldn't help but imagine the worst, each scenario more painful than the last. My fingers gripped the phone tighter, knuckles white, nails digging into my palms, as the weight of suspicion settled in my chest like a stone. I wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this was just an ordinary delay, a minor complication, something inconsequential that would soon be resolved. But the tone in his voice, the cadence, the subtle inflection that hinted at secrecy, began to gnaw at the edges of my resolve. The rain intensified, tapping louder against the windshield, a relentless percussion that mirrored the turmoil inside me. I felt a cold sweat run down my back, my breath coming in shallow, uneven gasps, as if the very air in the car had thickened with tension. Every passing car felt like an observer to my distress, their headlights cutting through the darkness and reflecting off the wet asphalt in sharp, fleeting streaks. It was as if the world itself was conspiring to heighten my sense of isolation, to amplify the vulnerability I felt sitting alone in a car that had betrayed me just as much as the uncertainty of the call. I tried to steady myself, closing my eyes for a brief moment, willing calm to return, willing the fear to subside. But it was impossible. My thoughts spiraled uncontrollably, each imagined scenario feeding the next, each doubt layering on top of another, until I could scarcely remember what hope felt like. The conversation continued, words exchanged that should have reassured me but only deepened my anxiety, each response a mirror reflecting the cracks in what I thought was solid ground. Somewhere between desperation and disbelief, I realized that I was no longer merely calling for practical help. I was seeking validation, seeking reassurance that the person I loved and trusted had not changed, that the life we had built together was still intact. I wanted him to be my anchor, my safe harbor in the storm, but the distance in his voice suggested otherwise. The act of reaching out, once simple, had transformed into an emotional tightrope, with every word, every inflection, threatening to send me tumbling into despair. I gripped the phone as if it were the only lifeline left in the world, feeling the cold seep through the device and into my hands, mingling with the heat of my rising panic. My mind raced with memories of laughter, of promises, of ordinary nights now tainted by suspicion and fear. Each memory clashed violently with the present reality, and I realized that the breakdown of the car was only the beginning. The true collapse was internal, an unraveling of trust, certainty, and emotional safety, leaving me stranded in a storm far more treacherous than the rain outside. I had been driving along the dimly lit street, hoping against hope that the night would end peacefully, that I could pull into my driveway and leave the tension behind me. But fate had other plans. As I stepped out of the car, the cold rain soaking through my coat, I noticed a faint glow in the distance, a light from a car parked near the small corner cafe we often passed on this route. I thought perhaps it was just another late-night driver, someone stopping for a break, but my instincts told me to look closer. My heart pounded in my chest as I approached cautiously, every step heavy with a strange mixture of dread and curiosity. And then I saw him. My husband. He was standing beside a car I did not recognize, talking, laughing even, in a way that made my stomach twist into knots. But it wasn't just that, it was who he was with. Her mother. The woman who had raised the girl he had once told me was just a friend. The sight struck me like a physical blow, the kind that knocks the breath out of you, leaving you gasping for air you cannot seem to find. I froze, unable to move, my eyes locked on the scene that made my heart feel as though it were shattering. Every laugh he shared, every gesture, every glance toward her mother felt like a knife twisting deeper into my chest. For a moment, I wanted to convince myself that it wasn't what it looked like, that I was misreading a harmless interaction. Perhaps they were discussing something important, something urgent, and I was overreacting. But deep down, a part of me knew better. The familiarity in his smile, the ease in his posture, the way he looked at her as though no one else existed in that moment, it was intimate, it was personal, and it was a betrayal of everything I had believed about us. My hands shook as I gripped the hood of my car for support, trying to steady myself while the world seemed to tilt violently around me. I wanted to call out, to demand answers, to make him see the devastation he had caused, but my voice refused to come. It was lodged somewhere deep in my throat, trapped by shock and disbelief. My mind raced, trying to process what I was seeing, trying to reconcile the man I thought I knew with the one standing there smiling at someone else. Every memory of trust, every shared moment of love, now felt tainted by suspicion, and the foundation of my relationship seemed to crumble beneath me. I remember the sound of the rain, amplified by the hollow echo in my ears, the wetness on my skin mixing with tears I hadn't yet allowed myself to shed. Time slowed, each second stretching endlessly, forcing me to confront the truth in excruciating detail. I could see the way he laughed, a small, private chuckle, and the casual tilt of her head, the warmth in her eyes, the way they were engrossed in each other's presence. It was as if the world had paused for them, leaving me standing on the outside, a silent observer to a scene I was never meant to witness. The betrayal wasn't just about the act itself, it was about the hiddenness, the secrecy, the quiet dismantling of trust that I had taken for granted. My thoughts became a whirlwind of questions, accusations, and fear. How long had this been going on? How many moments had I been blind to? How many lies had been hidden behind smiles and casual gestures? The uncertainty gnawed at me, a relentless echo that filled every corner of my mind, leaving no space for comfort or rationalization. Every instinct told me to run, to escape the scene, to shield my heart from the pain, yet I remained rooted, unable to tear my eyes away. I wanted answers, but even the thought of confronting him sent a wave of anxiety crashing through me. The scene was simple, mundane in its surface detail, yet beneath it lay layers of emotional devastation I was barely equipped to face. The betrayal was not loud, not dramatic, it was quiet, insidious, and it struck with the subtlety that makes it impossible to ignore. As I watched, I felt my own reality fragment, each shard of trust and love I had held onto slipping through my fingers. I remembered the promises, the laughter, the late-night talks, the comfort of knowing we were partners in life, only to realize that in this single moment, everything I believed in was in question. The scene unfolded like a cruel play, and I was the unwilling audience, forced to witness the unraveling of my world in a matter of seconds. The rain continued its relentless rhythm, each drop a reminder of the coldness of the night and the warmth of betrayal I felt in equal measure. I clenched my fists, the nails biting into my palms, the cold seeping into my bones, while my mind tried to make sense of what it could not. The sight of him with her mother was not just shocking, it was a painful awakening, a moment that would forever alter the way I saw him, the way I saw us, and the way I saw myself. The moment I realized what I was seeing, a cold shock ran through me. And every instinct screamed at me to act, to demand answers, to confront the reality I had stumbled upon. My mind raced, every memory of our life together colliding with this image that I couldn't unsee. I remembered his promises, the late-night talks, the quiet moments of trust we had shared, and yet in front of me, everything seemed to crumble, leaving a hollow ache in the center of my chest. It wasn't just disbelief that paralyzed me, it was the weight of betrayal, the sting of a truth I hadn't been prepared to face, and the overwhelming fear that nothing would ever feel the same again. I wanted to approach him, to ask why, to understand how this could happen, but my legs felt rooted to the ground. The rain poured steadily around me, a cold curtain that seemed to heighten the distance between us. Every droplet that hit my face felt like a mirror of my own turmoil, reflecting back the confusion, the hurt, and the growing sense of alienation. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat a harsh reminder that my life, the one I had trusted so completely, had changed in an instant. I remember taking a step closer, hesitant, my hands trembling at my sides. I wanted to make sense of it, to find some explanation that would restore order to the chaos, but there was nothing. His laughter, the casual way he leaned toward her, the ease of his movements, all of it screamed a familiarity that did not belong to me. I felt like an intruder in my own life, a ghost watching a scene meant to exclude me, and the pain was sharp enough to make my vision blur. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady, trying to summon the courage to speak, to confront, to demand the truth. Every instinct told me to run, to escape, to protect my heart from further injury, yet another part of me stayed, anchored by the need to witness the truth for myself. There was a crushing weight in knowing that the life I had taken for granted was built, at least in part, on illusions. The betrayal wasn't loud or violent, it was quiet, insidious, and devastating in its subtlety. Each gesture he made, each smile he shared, each moment of casual intimacy was a blow, a reminder that the foundation of trust we had built was fractured. I could feel tears forming, threatening to spill, but I pressed my hands against my face to stop them, feeling the cold rain mix with the warmth of my own pain. I thought about the times we had laughed together, the shared dreams, the long conversations where I believed we were partners in life and in heart, and now all of it seemed like a fragile illusion. The confrontation between what I had known and what I now saw was almost unbearable, a tug-of-war between love, loyalty, and the undeniable evidence of betrayal. I remember taking a deep breath, trying to steady the whirlwind of emotions inside me. Anger began to rise, hot and fierce, demanding that I respond, that I confront him, that I assert my presence in this scene. Yet beneath the anger was a deeper, more painful emotion, profound sadness. The kind of sadness that sinks deep into your bones, that colors your entire perception of the world, and leaves you feeling exposed and raw. I realized in that moment that I wasn't just upset about what I had seen. I was grieving the life I thought I had, mourning the trust that had been quietly stolen from me, and questioning how I could ever reconcile the man I loved with the reality of his actions. The rain continued to fall, relentless, washing over the pavement, the cars, and me, as though the night itself was amplifying my inner storm. I clenched my fists, feeling the cold metal of the car hood beneath my fingers, grounding myself in the present, yet my mind kept returning to the image I could not escape. Each glance at them, Each movement, each word I imagined passing between them added to the crescendo of emotion building inside me. The confrontation with the truth was overwhelming, and I felt as though the ground had shifted beneath me, leaving me unsteady, vulnerable, and uncertain. In that moment, the weight of all I had carried, all I had hoped for, all I had trusted, pressed down upon me. The confrontation wasn't just about betrayal, it was about clarity, about seeing the reality that had been hidden, about understanding the fragility of appearances. I realized that sometimes the truths we discover are not delivered gently, that life has a way of shattering illusions with brutal precision, and that confronting reality is both terrifying and necessary. The pain was raw, sharp, and consuming, and yet beneath it, a quiet resolve began to stir, a small flicker of strength emerging from the depths of heartbreak. The realization of what I had witnessed settled over me like a heavy, suffocating fog. And I felt my chest tighten with a mix of disbelief, anger, and sorrow. It wasn't just that he had been with her mother, it was the hiddenness, the secrecy, the knowledge that there had been moments, countless ordinary moments, in which I had believed in a reality that was never entirely true. I replayed scenes from the past weeks, months, even years, searching for signs, clues, anything I might have missed. Every smile, every casual gesture, every little secret that I had assumed was innocent now carried the weight of suspicion, and it made my heart ache in a way that was almost physical, a deep, gnawing pain that I couldn't shake. I thought about confronting him, about demanding an explanation, about forcing the truth into the open. The urge was overwhelming, a fiery, relentless force that burned inside me. But with it came fear of what I might discover, fear of the answers that could shatter my world completely, fear of the confrontation itself. The night air felt thick and heavy, as if it mirrored the weight of my emotions, pressing down on me, making every movement feel like a monumental effort. I wrapped my arms around myself, seeking comfort where there was none, feeling exposed and unprotected in the rain-soaked night. I could see his gestures, the casual way he leaned toward her, the ease in their conversation, and my stomach churned with nausea. It wasn't just the act itself, it was the intimacy, the familiarity, the undeniable connection that should never have existed outside the bounds of our marriage. My mind raced through questions I didn't want to ask aloud, questions I wasn't sure I could even bear to answer in my own thoughts. How long? Why? Was it a single moment or something ongoing? Had I been blind to subtle signs, or was this a sudden betrayal that had erupted without warning? Each possibility twisted in my mind, coiling tighter and tighter, until it felt as though my head might split under the pressure of uncertainty. The rain continued its relentless descent, each drop a reminder of my solitude, each patter a drumbeat echoing the turmoil within me. I felt the cold seep into my bones, but the chill was nothing compared to the icy shock of betrayal running through my heart. I wanted to scream, to shout, to demand answers from the universe, from him, from anyone who could validate the pain I felt. But the voice inside me was small, uncertain, trembling with fear and disbelief. I pressed my hands against the wet windshield, grounding myself, attempting to anchor my emotions to something tangible, while my thoughts spiraled into chaos. The confrontation between expectation and reality was brutal. I had believed in us, in the life we were building together, in the trust that had been our foundation. And now, standing there in the rain, watching him with her mother, I realized that foundation had cracks I had never imagined. Every shared memory felt suddenly fragile, every promise haunted by the shadow of deceit. The realization struck hard. The betrayal wasn't just in the act, but in the quiet, hidden way it had unfolded, in the way life could be so ordinary on the surface and so devastating beneath it. I felt my body tense, a mixture of adrenaline and heartbreak coursing through me, making it difficult to breathe, to think, to move. The desire to confront him, to force the truth into daylight, warred with the instinct to retreat, to protect myself from further emotional damage. I thought of the life we had built together, of shared laughter and shared struggles, and the contrast between those memories and the current moment was unbearable. I realized that pain could be silent, subtle, and still cut as deeply as any scream or shout, leaving a wound that could not easily be bandaged. As the minutes stretched, I could feel the world narrowing around me, focusing only on the scene before me, the betrayal, the silence, and the rain. I realized that this was not a fleeting moment. It was a turning point, a fracture in the reality I had taken for granted, a moment that would forever alter the way I viewed him, myself, and the life we had shared. The truth was no longer a distant concept. It was tangible, raw, and unavoidable. I could not ignore it, could not pretend it did not exist, and yet facing it felt like stepping into a storm without shelter, every gust of wind and every drop of rain a reminder of vulnerability, loss, and the painful clarity of reality. As the reality of the betrayal sank in, a strange mixture of emotions began to rise within me. There was anger, hot and sharp, cutting through the fog of shock that had held me frozen moments before. There was sorrow, deep and unrelenting, seeping into every corner of my being, filling the spaces that once felt safe with aching emptiness. And yet, beneath it all, there was a quiet flicker, a fragile ember of strength that refused to be extinguished. It was the part of me that remembered who I was before the heartbreak, the part that knew I deserved more than pain and deception, the part that recognized that in this moment of devastation, I had a choice, to crumble or to rise. I drew in a shaky breath, trying to steady the storm of feelings threatening to overwhelm me. The rain had soaked through my coat, chilling me to the bone, but I welcomed the cold as a distraction from the heat of my emotions, as a grounding force to keep me tethered to reality. My hands, once trembling with fear, began to tighten into fists not of panic but of resolve. I realized that I could not control his actions, nor could I erase the past, but I could control how I responded, and that realization brought with it a strange, powerful sense of liberation. I thought about all the moments I had invested in the relationship, all the trust and vulnerability I had given freely, and the pain that now seemed to mock that devotion. But as I stood there, heart racing, soaked to the skin, I understood that my worth was not diminished by betrayal, nor was my identity defined by another's choices. The betrayal had been a catalyst, a cruel awakening, but it had also ignited something in me, a recognition that I had the power to reclaim myself, to set boundaries, and to demand respect in ways I had never imagined before. The street around me felt empty, the night silent except for the relentless rhythm of rain on asphalt and car roofs. I looked at my own reflection in the wet surface of a nearby puddle, water rippling with each droplet, and for the first time in hours, I saw clarity. My eyes, red from shock and grief, held a glimmer of determination. I realized that the heartbreak, while raw and painful, could also be a turning point, a moment to stand firmly in my own strength and to refuse to be defined by the deceit of others. The world could betray me, people could betray me, but my inner resolve was mine to cultivate, mine to protect, mine to wield as a shield and a guiding force. I began to walk slowly away from the scene, each step deliberate, grounding myself with the rhythm of my movement against the puddle-streaked street. I thought about the conversations I would have, the boundaries I would set, and the decisions I would make moving forward. Anger no longer paralyzed me. It energized me, sharpened my focus, and made me aware that I had choices even in the aftermath of such shocking discovery. I could allow myself to be crushed by despair, or I could transform this moment of betrayal into a source of personal empowerment, and I felt a tentative courage rising in me at the very idea. Memories of laughter and shared moments still floated in my mind, bittersweet and fleeting, but I let them exist without allowing them to anchor me in pain. I realized that honoring my feelings did not mean surrendering to them. It meant acknowledging the hurt, letting it move through me, and then choosing a path forward with intention rather than reaction. There was a quiet dignity in that realization, a subtle but profound shift that gave me strength I hadn't felt moments before. I was no longer merely a witness to betrayal. I was an active participant in my own emotional recovery, shaping the narrative of my life even when others had attempted to fracture it. The rain continued to fall, relentless and steady, washing over the night and the streets, and I felt an odd kinship with it, persistent, cleansing, unstoppable. Just as the rain could not be controlled, life could not be entirely predicted, yet like the rain, I could endure, navigate, and emerge resilient. The emotional storm inside me, once chaotic and overwhelming, began to transform into a focused determination. I understood that strength was not the absence of pain or betrayal. It was the ability to acknowledge it, to face it, and to move forward with dignity and self-respect. I lifted my head, letting the rain stream across my face, feeling the cool droplets as a reminder that I was alive, that I was capable, that I had the power to protect my heart and rebuild from the fragments left behind. The act of seeing, understanding, and accepting the truth had been excruciating, but it had also been illuminating. It revealed the depths of my own resilience, the quiet power that had lain dormant until tested, and the profound realization that self-respect and personal strength could rise even from the darkest moments.